You all can tell that this is Laetare Sunday, right? That's why I'm wearing and rocking the pink again today, okay? It gives us a little bit of a chance to rejoice. In the good old days, Lent was a lot tougher than it is now, okay? And so in the middle of Lent, so that they could give everybody a little bit of breathing space, they reminded everybody that you can be happy in the middle of your suffering, right in the middle of Lent. And they'd say, take a good deep breath because we got a few more weeks to go. Okay? And that's where we are. And so we had a family moving this morning from Forsyth, and before they moved, we wanted to celebrate First Communion with the kids. And so I've been having a very joyful morning. Okay? If you guys can make me smile the same way those 3 kids did this morning, it'll be a good morning continued. Okay? But we have this opportunity to rejoice here in the middle of Lent. And we rejoice because the idea is that we are people who are supposed to be able to see. We are people that because of our relationship with Jesus, we are supposed to see life in a completely different way. We're supposed to see our lives in a completely different way. And if we really can see with the eyes of Jesus, our lives are changed. Now, last night and this morning, although she showed up last night, we were going to be celebrating scrutinies, okay, with our 2 folks that are going to be baptized. We got lots of others that are already baptized in the Christian tradition, but we got 2 that have not yet been baptized. And so last night, we celebrated with both of them that God is continuing to remove anything from their sight, or remove anything that's blocking their sight, as they try to focus on him and move forward. And so as we look at them, all of the rest of us are supposed to be re-upping, okay? All of the rest of us are also supposed to be looking at our lives and saying, where is it that we're blind? Where is it that we can't see? Where is it, Lord, that we need to be able to see the same way that you see? Because our readings today are about exactly that, seeing in the midst of what sometimes clouds that sight. And so we're encouraged and we're told we need to see as God sees, not as we see. All right? And we're told that both in the first reading and in a different way in the gospel. So I'm going to tell you about a reality that we've had up here on top of this hill on the last few weeks. You know that we purchased the house that was next to the rectory. And there was an old Baptist minister and his wife who lived there for years and years and years. And as often happens when somebody moves out, and so the woman just recently died, and they were very certain, because of the relationship, especially that the other pastors, the previous pastors, had with them. They always wanted to make sure we had the first right of refusal in buying that house, and so we bought the house. And as so often happens when a house has been lived in for umpteen years, they had to clean out all the stuff that nobody wanted anymore. How many of you got a lot of stuff that nobody wants anymore? Oh yeah, okay? Well, leave it for your kids, okay? And they can clean out the house when you're gone. But that's exactly what happened. So they were cleaning out the house. So first they got the big Mondo dumpster, and they loaded it up, okay? And then recently they also got a second smaller one, all right? And they loaded that one up too. Now, this is the part that absolutely amazes me, okay? Because we're here on the top of this hill, and not many people drive through the parking lot, except, between the rectory and the church here to go, and cut through the streets, okay? I don't know whether they put a homing beacon in those things. I don't know what happens. But you should have seen the number of people who came to dumpster dive in those dumpsters while they were there. And I was absolutely fascinated because I just thought, we're on top of the hill, nobody's going to mess with that stuff. But you'd be amazed at the times of the day and night when people just coming by and they go dumpster diving. They just get in the dumpster and they start going through the detritus of somebody else's life because they're looking for some treasure. Because what may be worthless to the people who were trying to get rid of it all, it might be somebody else's treasure. Now, this is what I'm going to tell you about God. God is the consummate dumpster diver. God is the consummate dumpster diver. Because what God does is he will get into the messiness and the junk of our lives. And he gets into our lives, and he takes us out of the junk by the scruff of the neck, and he shakes all the detritus off of us. And he looks at us and says, I choose you. I choose you. That's what God does for you and for me. We may think that we're junk, but that's not the way God sees it. We may think that somebody else is junk, okay? If we're a little self-righteous, okay? Well, thank God I'm not like that person over there. We all get there. God doesn't see it that way. God sees with completely different eyes. God sees the full truth about who we are. And he shakes the junk off of us and he says, I can clean you up because you're a treasure to me. God has done that for us throughout history. He does it for us all the time. And let's face it, we're messy. Let's face it, we sometimes choose to cover ourselves up with junk. But I'm going to say to you, we have a God who remembers the full truth about us. And so while God may look at us at one moment and say, I wasn't really happy about that, but you matter to me. God is the one that says that to us all the time. God is the one who will clean up our lives and remember the full truth about us and invite us back into the fullness of life. We see it all the time. We see it today in our first reading. Saul, okay? Saul was the king. Saul was God's anointed. And as one of my former scripture scholars, Father Frank Cleary at St. Louis U used to say, the reason why Saul got picked is because Saul was a big, tough warrior. And he could knock heads together from anybody that challenged our ancestors in the faith. And so in that context, all right, Saul was the one chosen. And Saul did knock heads for God in that regard. But then Saul started seeing things differently than God saw them. And eventually God said, Saul isn't working for me anymore. I'm going to anoint another one. And so he says to Samuel, you go to Jesse's household and I'm going to show you the one that I'm going to anoint. I'm going to show you my new chosen one. So Samuel tells the king a big lie that he's going out to have this feast and whatever. And he goes out to Jesse's house and he says, oh, surely this first one is going to be the one. Because the first one was kind of like Saul. The oldest, the toughest, the best warrior. And God says, I don't want that one. Samuel's like, are you sure? God says, you're looking with human eyes. You got to learn to see with mine. Samuel's like, okay, bring the next one. And the next one gets rejected, and the next one gets rejected, and the next one gets rejected. And all the way until finally, Samuel has to say, do you have any others? And Jesse winds up saying, well, there is the youngest, and he's out tending the flocks, the runt of the litter. Okay? He's out tending the flocks. And Samuel's like, well, you better bring him in here because we're not having this feast until God's had a chance here. So they bring in David, the runt of the litter, basically a little pretty boy, no tough warrior, but a pretty boy. And all of a sudden, God says, this is the one I want. And you can almost kind of hear in the back of, Samuel's mind, are you sure? But again, it's not as we would look at it and see it. It's as God sees it. And God said, this is the one. And what does David wind up becoming? David winds up becoming a man after God's own heart. That's what we hear in the scriptures. Now I'm going to ask you, was David perfect? By no means. Of course, if you really stop and look at all of our ancestry, God only works through the sinners. So those of you who don't sin, good luck. God only works through the sinners. And David was a great big sinner. And so many times he started to wander away from the Lord. But when he started to wander away from the Lord, somehow he got the message that said, hey, you're not going where you're supposed to be going. Can you come back to me again? Will you come back to me again? And David did. So David, despite the fact that he did horrible things, God grabbed him up out of the junk, shook him off, and said, "You're still a man of my heart, and I am still going to use you." We need to remember those things about ourselves. So I'm going to give you a great chance this afternoon. Some of you may have heard that at 3 o'clock this afternoon, we're having our reconciliation service. There are going to be 12, maybe 15 priests. They keep waffling on me. Never trust a priest. But there are going to be 12 to 15 priests here this afternoon, and we're going to be scattered around the church, and we're going to celebrate Form B of reconciliation. Okay? Now, if you need Form A, if you need counseling, or you need to sit down and pour out your heart forever, this is not the one for you. Okay? We got plenty of time that we celebrate Form A. You can always make an appointment with a priest, whatever. This is Form B. Basically what Form B is, we do everything together. We do the greeting together. We do the act of contrition together. We do the readings together. We do everything together. And then the only thing you go to the priest for, 1 minute, is you back up the dump truck and you dump the sins. The priest gives you absolution and you run. That's Form B, all right? And it's legit. Form C we can only use if the Titanic's going down, okay? We use this form when we got large numbers of people and we're trying to get everybody to go to confession before Christmas, before Easter. We use this form if you know you're a sinner and you don't really need to be counseled on anything. You just come and dump your sins and say, "I'm still a mess." And the priest goes, "And God still loves you." And he gives you absolution. And then we stay together until we're all finished because I love this form because it keeps everything in perspective. When we go with Form A, sometimes we forget that we're just like everybody else in the church. Form B, we can't forget because there's 300 sinners here, including the 15 priests that are around the room. And all of us are coming together at one time to celebrate the Lord's forgiveness. So if you haven't been in a while, please come. If you went a couple weeks ago and you still realize life's been messy in the last couple of weeks, please come. If you need to do Form A and sit down and talk for a little while, do that at a different time. But this will be Form B. And we're going to dump our sins, and we're going to be grateful and happy when we're done. Okay? God remembers the bigger truths about us, even when we forget, even when we can't see it. Now, just a few words on the gospel, and I love this gospel. Read it again sometime this week, okay? Read it again sometime this week. I'm going to suggest that today's penance is going to be exactly that we just read this passage again sometime this week and just read it through, because there's so many pieces in there, and I'm only going to be able to say a little bit about a couple of them, okay? So first of all, here comes the man born blind. And of course, the self-righteous people are saying, what did his parents do? What did he do that he was born blind? And Jesus is like, he's not blind because of sin. Just watch and see what God's glory does, okay? Just watch the situation and see what God's glory can do. And so, then he makes mud, a la the creation story, mud, which we were made out of. Jesus reaches down and he makes a little bit of mud. Aren't you glad I don't heal this way? I just usually put my hand on top of your head. But Jesus makes mud and with his spit, and then he rubs it on the man's eyes and then says, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." And the man comes back after being born blind, comes back being able to see. Can you imagine what sensory overload he must have been on? He doesn't understand anything of what's going on. All he knows is that suddenly he can see and he's been healed. And they start questioning him about what Jesus did. And he goes, "I don't know. All I can tell you is that I couldn't see and now I can." And they start trying to get everything. They start questioning his parents. They start trying to question his veracity. They're questioning everything. And he's just like, "I tried to tell you what happened and you won't listen. So why do you want to hear it again? All I can tell you is that I was blind and now I see. I was blind and now I see." We need to learn how to dumpster dive in our own lives. We need to learn how to jump into the middle of all that and pull ourselves up enough and be able to call out to God, I'm here, please grab me and shake me off. We've got to learn to dumpster dive in our own spirits. And again, sometimes in the church, I don't think we figure this out. Because really, Jesus wants to enter a relationship with each and every one of us. And sometimes in the church, we don't get this. I think Pope Francis gets it. But I sometimes think we keep resisting. No, wait a minute. Some of these people are sinners. Who else did he come for? Other than for sinners. And that includes you and me, not just those other people. All Pope Francis is saying is, all we can say to people is, stay out there, you're just not quite good enough for us yet. Or is he saying, can we enter into a relationship with people just like Jesus did? And if we enter into the relationship, let's let the Lord do the changing. Let's let the Lord do the changing. But let's just enter into a relationship with people. Sometimes I wonder what's wrong with us as a church, as we want to stand in that right spot and basically say, but that person's a sinner. Do any of you want to dare raise your hand and tell me you're not? That's what we're going to do here this afternoon, is all of us are going to come together and we're going to all say, yeah, we're sinners. We're a mess. And we all are. How do we reach out in love and do the same thing that Jesus did when Jesus can look past all that stuff and still say, but you matter to me. You matter to me. And I can see big truth about you. I can see it. And I want you to live it. Let's dumpster dive in our own lives. Let the Lord pick us up out of the junk, because we are treasures to him. We are treasures to him. And we need to start believing it about ourselves and about every other child of God. They're treasures to be claimed, not junk to be thrown out. Let's ask our God to be with us this day, because if we were blind, there'd be no sin in that. But if we claim to see it all, then our sin remains.